This is a fanfic reading for the story Peter, Please Get Down Here, Stop Freaking Me Out Kid by Gimme_the_MF_T. Summary: Tony and Peter were having their usual lab day and totally weren't having wholesome father and son vibes. Then suddenly Peter started acting weird, scuttling around. No, Pepper, I didn't give the kid too much caffeine. It was lab day at the tower, and Peter and Tony were elbows deep in one of the suits, fixing any final issues. Tony liked having the kid around. He was brilliant, but of course Tony was still the Tony Stark. Yet the kid was much more useful and quick than most of his employees. What, Pep? He is. So what if that was a little mean? The kid was snarky and a little shit, but Tony could feel something like pride in his chest whenever the kid backs him up while retelling his dreadful and horrendous, and most likely classified, meetings. So they told you were insane? Mr. Stark, I think threatening to buy Starbucks to rename it Starkbucks is a little... Peter pulled his arm out of the suit. Pah, you dare question me, the Tony Stark? It's brilliant, Tony scoffed as he found a few stray wires. Ah, shit, forgot to solder these. Hey, kid, can you grab the kit? It's in the third drawer. Peter rolled his eyes and pulled away from the suit. Well, I think the great and mighty Mr. Stark could do better than that. Is that the green one? Peter holds up a small green case. Yeah, green's fine. Also, what's wrong with Starkbucks? Peter started setting up the kit next to Tony. I don't know, more like Stark Butts. Tony spluttered and looked at him with a straight face. Butt jokes aren't funny. Butt jokes will forever be funny. Tony plugged in the soldering iron, letting it heat up, and turned to the younger, who shrugged. I think people ordering a giant Stark Butts would crack me up any day. The two snorted. Should I change the logo? Friday. Run a quick scan for these wires. I think they're part of the lighting system. Tony held up the wires. Certainly. It seems they are a part of the lighting of the targeting system. The AI spoke in her calm tone. Targeting system? You mean like a laser sight? Why do I have that when I use the internal interface? He grumbled out that last part. Also, kid, should the logo be a butt? Not sure, boss. It is possible it could be a potential precaution for when auto-targeting systems are offline. Well, that solves it. Kid? Tony takes up the soldering iron and a small spool of wire and started to bond the wires. No, butts would be too much. We should use a moon. Tony snickered, but tried to keep his hand steady. Unfortunately, the wire from the spool seemed to not stick very well. Moon. God, kid. Hey, do we have a different wire? Tony turned to see the kid had suddenly disappeared. He looked around the lab for where he could have possibly gone. Pete? Ruse. Some scuffling above got his attention. Jesus, Ruse, why are you up there? Peter, sticking to the ceiling, was crawling around, frantically searching for something on the ceiling. However, Peter was strangely unresponsive and intensely focused, and frankly, it was starting to freak Tony out. Kid, you okay there? He set the soldering iron back in its holder so there wouldn't be any weird spider kid and a fire in the lab. Peter jolted and scuffled around some more. The teen looked disgruntled and annoyed. Then the kid chirped. What the hell? His hand shifted the wires and Peter pounced. Then Tony saw it. A red dot. It was shining on the kid's back, who frustratedly searched for it by scuttling around. What? He felt incredulous. Either this was a hallucination or he was finally losing it. He wasn't even able to process the noises the teen was making. Tony's grip loosened on the wires, making this dot disappear. Peter chirped and scrambled. His grip tightened, the dot reappears. Peter snapped his hands forwards, hands going straight through the ceiling. Pieces flew everywhere. Fortunately, Peter seemed to snap out of it and yelped. Tony wheezed. Fry, please tell me you caught that. Huh, Mr. Stark? Of course, sir. My monitoring system records everything unless told otherwise. What, Mr. Stark? Tony could barely breathe and speak while tears leaked from his eyes. Oh, shit. Quick, send it to Pep. Of course. Friday? Pepper smiled at the two in the video. Seeing Tony laugh this hard while ruffling Peter's hair, who was confused and covered in plaster chunks, warmed her heart. Peter was perfect for Tony, and the same went for Peter. But now, Pepper was going to have to send an email warning to Starbucks. End. This is a Podfic for Kid, What the Hell Are You Doing? You Knocked Barnes Out by gimme_the_mf_t on AO3. Summary. The Avengers get in a tough spot and surrounded by Hydra. Kid, what the hell? You took out Barnes! Chapter 1. It was in the middle of a fight, the Avengers and a sizable group of Hydra soldiers. Suddenly, the Avengers found themselves cornered. The flight was under a concrete bridge, thankfully out of civilians' way, and near a shipyard. Sam's wings were shot and wiring was exposed. Natasha had a nasty cut on her arm, while Steve had his leg grazed by a narrow shot. The rest had various minor injuries as well as more concerning ones. Although the situation was beginning to lean towards Hydra's favour, they had backup. Spider-Man. Thankfully, the area was near enough Queens that it didn't take long for the young spider to appear. He swiftly took out the men around Natasha and webbed down the other by Sam before jumping to the underside of the bridge for advantage. However, the slight victory didn't last long. Don't fucking move unless you want lead in your freaky friend's head. The area was tense and silent. One of the men, who seemed like the leader, had a gun pulled on Bucky with a red dot centered on his forehead. Bucky had his hands up in a placating manner. All right, now tell Bug Boy to get back off my men. Sir? One of the underlings sounded almost disgusted. Scared? What? The man irritatingly barked out. Spider-Man, he's freaking us the fuck out. What? Everyone's attention was now on Spider-Man, whose whites of his mask were as large as can be, and he was he wiggling his butt? Then suddenly, he shot off like a rubber band and pounced on his own team member. Bucky Barnes let out a pained oof and collapsed from the sudden body slam from the spider. Both the Avengers and Hydra were perplexed. Kid? Tony yelped. What the hell are you doing? Clint hissed. But the spider didn't seem to be paying attention nor aware. Rather, he seemed frantic. He was crouched, crawling around, looking under his feet, right next to Barnes' unconscious form. Kid, what the hell? Sam walked closer to the unconscious man and Spider, but stopped and raised hands when the guns pointed at him. Hey, back off, fucker! The laser pointed on his forehead. The spider, still looking frantic, started chirping and chattering like some kind of creature. This greatly unsettled the Hydra soldiers. Why is the fucking bug broken? Hey, freak, just put your hands up! The spider was still not looking at them as he started looking at Bucky with a frustrated look. Sam felt he had to do something because this was not how the kid usually behaves. Kid, psst, kid, look at me. Spider-Man snapped up to Sam with squinted eyes, but then his eyes went huge and, just as before, he crouched down and leapt at Sam with such speed Sam couldn't dodge in time, but thankfully wasn't knocked out like Bucky. Spider-Man, however, looked frustrated and irritated and let out a sharp inhuman hiss. Everyone at this point was thoroughly freaked out, though Sam was the most terrified and let out an unmanly scream. No, the fuck I did not, Barton. Kid, please don't eat me. Tony chortled. Everyone grew silent. Sorry? No, it seems like you know what the fuck happened. Please, elaborate. Tony hummed and pointed an armoured finger at the ground next to Sam. A red dot appeared, and Spider-Man pounced. Tony zigzagged it while the young spiderling perfectly followed, frantically grasping at it and chirped when he came close. Clint snorted, but quickly slapped a hand on his mouth. Their opponents were utterly confused and frozen. However, Tony snapped the laser at the guy with the gun, and Spider-Man slammed into him with such force and followed the laser, only to repeat the same with the rest of the soldiers. Hey, Cap, Tony called as he draws the spider to the underside of the bridge. The hero stood, slightly out of it while watching the spider scuttle around. Think you can tear off a small piece of red fabric for a sec? What? Just a small piece. I'll fix you up later. Steve shrugged but found no reason to refuse, but still very confused, and walked over to tear a piece off the hem of his glove. Great. Now just throw it on the ground there. He pointed at the ground with a free hand just in front of him. Steve tossed it, and Tony shot the laser to the piece. He turned it off instantly, and the teen pounced on all four and slowly looked under his hand to swiftly snatch the piece. Yes, Mr. Stark, He looked up, mid-fist pump in the air, to see the whole team desperately trying to hold in laughter. Yeah, Pete? He looked at his surroundings, wincing at all the groaning and taken-out Hydra agents, and an unconscious Bucky, and loudly gasped, "Oh my God, Mr. Barnes!" Peter ran over to check on him. Clint fell to his hands and knees, bow forgotten, and wheezed. Not even Natasha wasn't affected, and simply bit her lip and closed her eyes to keep the laughter in. But then Sam laughed, and the team started following. Huh? Did I miss something? Mr. Stark, why is Mr. Barnes like this? Natasha snorted and turned away, but her shoulders shook. Clint rolled on his back, tears and snot rolling down his face. Steve was now laughing while Tony cackled. Don't worry about it, kid. What's happening? Mr. Stark? Mr. Barnes? Bonus, Chapter 2. Kid, please, you're scaring my employees. Summary. It was just a simple presentation. Kid, you good? You're kinda scaring the employees. Basically a prequel to Chapter 1 and how Tony found out about this particular spider quirk. Everything was fine. The meeting room wasn't in one of the newer labs, so instead of the high-tech holograms or such, they just had a simple projector and screen. However, something strange had occurred, and Tony was absolutely puzzled. Halfway through Pepper's presentation, Tony and some of the lab directors that were aware of Peter and Tony's close relationship, they even believed they were actually related. Pepper briefly pointed at a graph with a laser and traced the line. Peter dropped his pen with a clatter. Tony looks over. The kid was wide-eyed and entranced by the slideshow. Kid? Tony whispers. No response. Tony was starting to worry. Had the kid's spidey sense gone off? Was there an attack? He was just about to call for his suit, until suddenly the kid jerked and chirped? Tony looked to the slide and noticed the kid tensing whenever the laser was used. Tony was perplexed. A few of the directors looked over at the kid with concern and apprehension. The slide switched to the next. All right, and so the possible trends and consumer responses may have these types of concerns. Oh my God! Pepper squeaked as Peter launched across the room with his hand smacking the board. Everybody froze as the sound echoed. Tony busted out laughing while Pepper and the directors stared. Tony! Kid, I love this side of you. End of story. This has been Kid, What the Hell Are You Doing? You Knocked Barnes Out. Part 2 of the What in the Hell Is That Spider Doing? Please Stop Kid series. Written by Gimme_the_MF_T on AO3. If you enjoyed this reading, I highly recommend heading over to the original fic, leaving them a kudos, and if you're feeling spicy, even a nice comment. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a lovely day, night, or whatever time it might be in your time zone. Bye-bye!